Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder it is time to have a look at another update 1.91 devblog, and this time it's a naval one for the USS Atlanta. This is a new light cruiser which is coming to the game in update 1.91 in the form of the American tech tree, and there's no way that this won't be at the top of the light cruiser line for the Americans just because of how powerful it is. The USS Atlanta is one of those iconic vehicles that many people have brought up to me when talking about ships, especially when the expansion into light cruisers happened. Many have wanted this machine for a long time, and I'm hoping alongside the Brooklyn is another machine that many people want to grind for to actually play, the top echelons of naval. I've been having a lot of fun around about the 4.3, 4.7 area of naval with the destroyers, mainly with the Soviet ones, but once I've been cracking into the cruiser area, it definitely has been a little bit of a slog now when it comes to playing stuff such as the first American light cruisers. So to now have the Brooklyn and also the Atlanta to work for through those first light cruisers, there is definitely no reason now to not play those American ones if you are interested in light cruiser and heavy cruiser gameplay. So, what are the main characteristics of the USS Atlanta? The first one is the ridiculous amount of guns that it has. It has 16 127mm. They are all based around sets of dual sets, meaning that they are all in sets of twin mounts, which you can see all over this vehicle. It has 3 sets on the front, 4 sets on the, and 5 sets on the back, and at any time, if you are broadside towards an enemy, you should be able to get 14 of these guns on target. So you have the 6 in the front, you have the 6 in the back, and then either side on the booty, there is this twin set on either side. So you can see in this picture here, where you have the 2 sets either side, once it comes around again. So that's 14 127mm that you can get on a target at any time in this machine, which is insane. This is easily the most armed vehicle that we have at those BRs. There are definitely some vehicles that have much larger caliber guns at the BRs that this will find itself at 5.7, I'm guessing, but the just sheer amount of punishment that can be put out by this machine alongside stuff like the Trenton is going to be incredibly worrying to play against. The USS Atlanta does have some downsides though to it. The fact that it has this massive armament on it also means that it isn't very well armored. 95mm is basically your belt for this machine, which will still be good against the majority of HE shells that you fight, but if the larger caliber guns decide to change to the AP shell, then you're going to be penned, and you're going to be penned hard. There's also the fact that because there are so many guns, there is massive ammo storage areas on this machine as well, so I can definitely see ammo detonations happening quite a lot. And because of the fact that it has these 1627mm, it also is lacking some firepower in the secondary or auxiliary department. So it only has access to 4 sets of 100 and let's see. So here we go. It has access to 4 triple 28mm cannons, and they look like this on the ship, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was 2 either side, meaning that it still has decent AA coverage with these, but you're going to have to rely more on your 127mm to get the job done when it comes to taking out aircraft. And I'm pretty sure these are the same which are on the late tier destroyers for the Americans, so stuff such as the Sumner, which you see here. Now, Sumner has access to 3 sets of dual 127mm, and I'll tell you why the Atlanta is not really worrying me, but I can definitely see it being a powerful machine as if a competition is not really added for other nations to it. And we'll go through a test cell and I'll show you why. So we're just firing, 127mm HE. I don't have the Sumner unlocked, but I've faced it many times when it comes to the game. And the one thing that is always apparent when I've played this compared to other destroyers is the fire rate on the 127mm is completely bonkers. And the Atlanta, with the ability to get 14 guns on at the same time, is just going to have exactly the same fire rate, or even maybe better. But look at the damn fire rate of these guns. And I'm sure, you know, the fire rate will be very similar on the Atlanta. Just imagine this, but instead of 6 rounds you're firing every few seconds, you're firing 14. Like, this is just going to terrorize other cruisers. It also means that if you are struggling with aiming, it is going to be very much easier to recalibrate and shoot once again. You'll also have a ton of ammunition to be able to fire at enemies, but this is why whenever you face these high-tier destroyers from the Americans, why once you get hit, you slowly just start taking so much damage from them. It's because of this high fire rate, and once they have you dialed in, they are just going to absolutely annihilate you. So far, we've got 4 reloads off before the first rounds have even landed near the light cruiser over there. How insane is that? You know, just as a general concept. So, even though this Atlanta is not going to have the biggest guns in the game, what it is going to have is just so much power behind them because of just the amount of projectile mass it's going to be able to fire at, you know, whatever direction it's firing at. Now, they talk about in the Devblog this idea of the fact that because it doesn't have a lot of auxiliaries, you're going to have to use the guns as, you know, AA defense. And in a lot of times, this isn't really going to work too well because normally when you have large caliber guns, the reload on them is too slow. Well, as I just showed you with the Sumner, the reload rate on these guns is incredibly quick, so changing between AP, HE and HEVT is much easier to do, and also dialing in on targets is also much easier to do. So being able to do that, if you're paying attention, will be incredibly easy to do in the Atlanta. So we're dealing with a machine which, yes, doesn't have as much armor as some of its compatriots at the level, but it does have the speed in the form of 60 kilometers an hour, it does have definitely the firepower, and it also has the fact that it can knock everything out of the air, just like, you know, the majority of other light cruisers can as well, since they've got a lot of secondary armaments. The problem, though, is, for me, when I look at the Atlanta, is the same issue that a lot of these larger machines have, and it's actually not to do with the vehicles themselves, but how they react in game to the controls. So the way that Naval is set up is you have 3 sets of armaments. So you have your primary, you have your secondary, and then you have your anti-air. So primary, secondary, tertiary. And normally, if you have something like a Sumner here, what you'll do is, we'll just go to test cell and show you, you know, how it is. You have them bound to 3 separate buttons because it forces you to do that. So you can see here, I have my primaries set. So, you know, I fire my primaries. Whereas if I click 2, I now have access to other guns, which are the 40s. So that's how I'm able to use them. And then, if I go to 3, then I have the AA, which is used here. Now, the problem with a system like this is that I cannot tell my front guns, my 127mm, my 2 on the front here, to shoot at a different target compared to the back gun here. So what you have happening is if you have a machine like the Atlanta, which is incredibly one type of gun heavy, which this is, you can only do a ton of single target damage, and there is no way of, let's say, getting these 3 front cannons to shoot at something different, or 3 front sets of cannons to the ones on the back. So you end up crucifying whatever you were hitting, you know, in the general direction over there, but at the same time, you have an issue of dealing with multiple targets at once. So this is going to be great one-on-one, pound for pound, against other light cruisers, but if you start getting machines such as, you know, the Nuremberg or such as the Southampton, which first of all have larger caliber guns, so therefore they should be able to fire at, longer ranges with a little bit more accuracy, and once hit, the Atlanta, do a hell of a lot of damage to it. But at the same time, if there's multiple targets, the Atlanta is going to struggle a hell of a lot more than other machines would, because of the fact that you can target select using the different forms of guns. So if you don't know what I mean by target select, you can actually tell the AI what to shoot in Naval. This is something that a lot of people don't know, but I did an aiming tutorial in Naval showing this. So there we go, that's front guns, so main guns. They're now targeted on that. Secondaries can shoot that, and auxiliary can shoot that. And if I tell them to shoot, they should all just shoot at those targets if they're in range. I'll actually change the tertiaries to this, so they'll shoot that. And this is, what you can do in Naval, and it basically means that, you can shoot different targets at the same time, and be able to, actually use your different sets of weaponry in different ways. But with the Atlanta, that's just not the case, because they're all going to be sat on your primary weapons. So that is definitely a problem I'm seeing with it. Also, the 127mm do have a bit of an issue with penetration. We are getting to a point where we do have machines in game which do have more armor than 127mm, especially when it comes to like cruisers. If we have a look at something like a Southampton or a Leander, which were added in the most recent patches, you're looking at 114mm of a belt, and angled, it's just not going through. So you're going to have to HE the majority of the time. So something like a Southampton with its 6 inches should be able to put out more damage to something like an Atlanta than the Southampton can take. So that is also something to think about, when you're going to be using these vehicles. And once again, it isn't as heavily reliant on its primaries that the Atlanta has. So even though, this is coming into the game, it's got a ton of firepower behind it, there are some issues which it may have against other vehicles. Will it add to an already really good American lineup at top tier? Yes, it will. And also stuff like the AM1, the Mauler being added to it, means that America has a great lineup, which is wonderful to see. And also, the fact is, there are some nations which have more heavy cruisers than others. If you look at the British, they have 4 of them. If you look at Japan, there's 4 of them sat there. The Soviets, they only have 3. The Germans, they also have only 3. And the Americans as well only have 3. So addressing this imbalance with another top tier like cruiser is good. And hopefully, with the addition of heavy cruisers in the Japanese tree, in the form of the Kako and the Furutaka, I hope what we see is not just more of these light cruisers with a ton of guns on them, but also an expansion into the heavy cruisers from nations like America, because to be honest, there are some really cool and innovative ideas from a lot of these heavy cruisers from America and also Britain, which I would love to see in the game. So anyway, I'm glad to see this. Hopefully something is addressed when it comes to the aiming of all of these guns, because I don't want to be able to just be single target focused in it. But apart from that, it is looking incredibly fun to play. Very much a dynamite scenario where it's going to be able to put out a lot of firepower, but it's also going to take in a lot of firepower. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.
I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, John Ryman, Joseph Anders, Martinez, Mopar 1969, Moxie, Super Cacti, Uyans Terry, and Elove Goats, and of course Seductive Trash Can for supporting the channel.